all sorts of saints. So, one of the, I put big inverted commas around this, joys of being the vicar of St Richard's is that once a year, the year one teacher asks me to give them a lesson in church about St Richard. I've mentioned this before, I believe, because St Richard is one of the most boring saints you can find. Basically, he was an administrator. And I know administration is fun for some people, but it doesn't make for great stories. And so I spiced it up a bit by starting the lesson by saying, because these are 5 and 6 year olds, right? Let's think about what a saint is. Let's think of different saints. Saints were people who followed Jesus, for example. And then we'd recently been to Bury St Edmunds, and I said St Edmund was a king who was killed by the Vikings. And I talked about different saints. And there's a really bright spark of a little girl in that class who said, is that true? I don't think that's true. Unasked. And the class teacher was loving this. And I'm going, well, yes, I mean, we don't know for sure. It happened a long time ago, but it's written at the time that this is what happened. She was like, well, I don't believe it. Yeah, scepticism in one so young. But it reminded me of that when I was reading our Bible reading. Jesus makes this remarkable statement, this tremendous statement. I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. But then comes the $100, is it the $1,000 question? Yeah. It's a question for you and me. Do you believe this? Oh, that can't be true. How can that possibly be true? Do you believe this? Richard Dawkins, in his book, The God Delusion, says no. Years ago, I read this book to see what assault he launched on Christianity. And he specifically refers to this passage, well, this event. It says, did Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead? Did he himself come alive again 3 days after being crucified? There's an answer to every such question, whether or not we can discover it in practice, and it's a strictly scientific answer. Miracles, by definition, violate the principles of science. So therefore, I mean, he doesn't say it, but it's pretty clear, isn't it? No, it cannot have happened. Lazarus cannot have been raised from the dead. Jesus could not have risen from the dead because you can't repeat the experiment. That's the nature of science. If you take carbon and oxygen and mix them together, you get carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide every time in the laboratory. But nobody else has risen from the dead, so how can it possibly be true? It can't. But Tom Wright, I don't think he's reflecting on Richard Dawkins. I can't remember where the quote exactly comes from. But he says, no, you've totally misunderstood the nature of history. We must never forget that science, by definition, studies the repeatable, whereas history, by definition, studies the unrepeatable. That is the total difference between science and history. And I don't know what you did today, but what your life today was not the same as your life yesterday. And even if you tried to live the same life today that you lived yesterday, it wouldn't be the same. Different things would happen. And that is the nature of time and reality. For example, the Bayeux Tapestry is coming to England sometime soon, apparently, you know, if it works out, if they get the insurance and all that sort of thing. It's Norman propaganda. Do you believe this? Do you believe that the Normans really conquered Britain in the year 1066? Oh, come on. Why do you believe that? Well, let's have a think. The Tower of London, Durham Cathedral, the fact that we say mutton and beef, as the posh Normans did for what the Anglo-Saxons had other names for, sheep and ox. You know, there's all sorts of evidence. Yes, the Normans did conquer Britain in 1066. And even if, yes, it was the victors who embroidered this tapestry, yet still, as historians, we believe it conveys truth. And the question here is, do you believe this? Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Do you believe it? Can you believe it? And the fascinating fact is, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, this is the only time Jesus did this. He did not repeat it. Jesus did not go round graveyards going, "Come out, come out, come out." He only did it this once. This is the one time in his entire ministry that he sought out somebody and raised them from the dead. So even that didn't happen again. It was a one-off. It was an unrepeatable event. Yes, Jesus did raise other people from the dead. I'm not going to test you out loud, but have a quick mental test. How many others? So there was a strange encounter mentioned only by Luke, where he's passing through the village of Nain and he comes across a funeral procession and there's a widow there who is mourning her son. And it seems as if it's kind of random that God prompts Jesus at that moment to say, "Look at this poor widow. Look, she needs her son back." And he raises the son from the dead out of compassion. Nothing more is made of it. Jesus raises a second person from the dead. And then there was a third one. Jairus, the ruler of the synagogue, seeks out Jesus and says, "My daughter's dying, come to the house." And Jesus is delayed, you may recall, by a woman who stops him on the way by seeking healing from him. And so the word comes from the house, "Oh, don't bother the teacher, your daughter's died." And Jesus says, "No, it's all right, just hang in there." And contrast this with what you've just heard about Lazarus. Jesus says, "Get everyone out the room. We need quiet. We need peace. We need privacy." And then he raises her from the dead. And he says, "Don't tell anyone about this. Give her something to eat." Total contrast. So Jesus doesn't do the same thing again at all. He may raise 3 people from the dead, but each time it's totally different. The circumstances are different. The way he does it is different. The outcome is different. And on this particular occasion, John tells us why he did it. Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." And then Jesus says, "Come on, Lazarus, out you come." Oh no, I can't resist, sorry. Lazarus, he said, "Come forth," if you know the authorized version. But I always want to know who came third. Sorry. So Jesus says, "I'm doing this to make a point. I'm doing this so you know who I am. I'm doing this so you know the Father is listening to me. I'm doing this so you know the Father's sent me." And I am sure what it is a prelude, a foretaste, a foreshadowing of the resurrection. To build that faith in his disciples. Doesn't really work, because they're still caught out when it happens. They still find it hard to believe at first. But Jesus shows that God has the power to do this, and that God can work in him to do this. And of course, as you may have heard me say before, you must have heard other preachers say it before, there's a difference between them, because Lazarus is resuscitated. I was looking up in French, it's the same word. Very poor language they have there. Jesus is resuscitated. No, he's not. He's resurrected. So Lazarus came back to this life with the danger of catching meningitis and with the reason, nobody asked me why I didn't kneel at St Andrew's this morning, but arthritis. We have all those things. Lazarus had those things. Jesus didn't have those things because Jesus was resurrected. Jesus was raised to a new quality of life, a new kind of life, the kind of life we can only dream of in science fiction, where he could appear in a locked up room and disappear before their eyes, but still eat and drink with them, be touched by them. This was an entirely different way of living, a sort of spiritual physicality or a physical spirituality. And that, says Jesus, is the resurrection we shall share too. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll come back to that in a moment. Because Jesus wants us to know that he is risen from the dead. And so he gave us proof. He gave us not just the promise of resurrection, but the proof of resurrection. The tomb was empty and the disciples saw it. But Jesus also appeared to them again and again over 40 days. So that we have more evidence than Martha had. When Jesus asked us the question, do you believe this? We not only have the resurrection, all she had was a biblical promise. We have the resurrection of Lazarus. We have the resurrection of Jesus. We have the accounts by the gospel writers that he was seen again and again. So we know it's true. We have so much more reason to believe this. Because, as I just mentioned, getting ahead of myself, because Paul says that is what awaits you as well. If you're a follower of Jesus, you will be raised too. If the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of his spirit who lives in you. It's not just resurrection then for Jesus, for Lazarus. It's resurrection for you and for me. And that is the promise that Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Jesus promises that for you. He promises it. But more than that, he proves it by raising Lazarus, by rising from the dead. He demonstrates it so that we can believe, so that we can be sure that this is the truth. And I could end there, but actually Paul has another little twist there in that reading from Romans that Paul's always a bit complicated, so it's easy to miss. That it's not just about pie in the sky when you die, it's also about steak on the plate while you wait. Because you are in the realm of the spirit, not the realm of the flesh. Even though your body is subject to death, one day we all will die because of sin, the spirit gives life because of righteousness. His spirit who lives in you. The power that raised Jesus from the dead will give life to our mortal bodies one day, but even now gives life in all its fullness to us in the present, here and now. The power of Jesus' resurrection is in everyday life, in us and among us and within us. Do you believe this? As Paul says, if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies, here and now, and at the resurrection, because of his spirit who lives in you. So Jesus, I believe, this morning asks us the same question as he asks Martha. Do you believe this? Do you believe in your eternal salvation being sure and signed and sealed and promised and definite? But more than that, do you also know that his spirit lives in you? The spirit that raised Jesus from the dead, the life of God, the power of God, the personal presence of God lives in you this afternoon. And lives in bread and wine. And lives in his word. And lives in his presence with you this afternoon. Because if you do believe that, if you do know that, it makes all the difference to how we face today. Makes all the difference to how we face tomorrow. It makes all the difference to how we cope with bad news about the church roof. It makes all the difference to how we cope with bad news about our health, or our finances, or our family. It makes all the difference if we know that not only is our future guaranteed, not only is our past forgiven, but in the present, the Spirit is with us. The Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead. Let's just be quiet for a moment and reflect on that, and then I'll lead us in prayer.